Hey guys, it's Layla from Ignite, and in today's video I'll be addressing a key theme from Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, studied within the comparative study of the textual conversations module in the HSC. If you are doing the HSC this year and you'd like some extra, assistance with your studies, check out our website at www.ignitehsc.com.au. We've got incredible resources which feature analysis, exemplar essays, notes on context and form for pretty much all of the HSC texts being studied. So check that out. I guarantee you will not regret it. But for now, let's get into today's content. So in this video, my goal is to address a key theme from Virginia Woolf's text and foreground those concerns which the hours then goes on to discuss, but I will be limiting my analysis to Mrs. Dalloway. And then I'll give you examples from the text which serve as evidence for the key concern that I raise, so that if you are starting to prepare your body paragraphs based on Mrs. Dalloway, you've got a bit of evidence to help you and to, kickstart that process. So it is practical, it'll get you building your essay scaffolds, which you definitely should be doing well in advance of the HSC trials. So let's take a look at my key concern and then we'll move into the analysis. So the central idea that I'd like to analyse is this notion of confinement within the text. And that's a little picture of a cover of a Virginia Woolf text. And you can see even the expression of this particular female figure is one that is unenthused. And we know that women around this time were very much trapped within a gendered hierarchy, wherein women were assumed to be subservient to their male counterparts. And the laws at the time, and particularly I think going up to the late 1930s, women were still disenfranchised. They didn't have the same rights as men. And there was the first wave of feminism during this contextual period as well. So there was, a burning desire and passion to address the fact that women were locked within their domestic existence, and that sense of domesticity, the maternal role, and the subservience to man were certainly ideas that Virginia Woolf agitated against. If you have read any other Virginia Woolf text, perhaps you studied A Room of One's Own, if you did Reading to Write in Year 11, we know that in that text, Virginia Woolf was really pushing for an awareness to see that women had been excluded from fiction, and she really interrogated the reason for why women were assuming this position of subservience to men and why men thought it their right to describe and write about how women should be and how they should look. And she certainly carries through some of those feminist ideas in Mrs. Dalloway as well. The way that confinement is carried through this text is both through the main protagonist, Mrs. Dalloway, but also through Septimus Warren Smith. So those feminist ideals aren't the only examples of confinement. But with regards to Mrs. Dalloway, we see that she is, entrapped in this sense of futility in her existence. She exists as the perfect hostess, a title that is very much tied to a domestic role, and she feels as though her life is reduced to this pointlessness that is tied to her domesticity. When we then think about Septimus Warren Smith, his confinement is of course trapped within this sense of masculinity that had compelled him to go to war, and he does very clearly suffer from PTSD. So his character is confined in the traumas of existence and mortality that were channeled through the First World War, which happened prior to Virginia Woolf writing this text. So we can see that gendered expectations, be it for the woman or the man, function as notions of confinement within these texts, and I will focalize in specificity Mrs. Dalloway's sense of confinement in her domestic role, her maternal role, and a sense of futile existence when her existence itself is very much predicated upon her husband. So that's what I'm going to analyze in the quotes to come. So central idea is confinement. If you're thinking about how to map this out within a broader essay structure, I recommend in a Module A essay, if you're looking at Dalloway and hours, to have a 4-body paragraph structure, alternating between Dalloway hours, but you don't want to, make the focus of the analysis too value or thematic based. The focus of this essay is textual conversation, so you need to discuss how your comparative study of these texts deepens your understanding and shapes meaning between them, but of course you can channel that discussion through the examples of certain values. So you would introduce confinement or gendered expectations or a sense of entrapment in your first paragraph on Mrs. Dalloway, and then in your second paragraph on that value in the hours, you would need to discuss how how engaging with the hours has challenged or enhanced or deepened your understanding of confinement as was represented in Mrs. Dalloway. I guess a core question you're posing in this module is, had I not studied Mrs. Dalloway alongside the hours, would I come to the same understanding that I now have of the central concerns of both of these texts? And the answer is, of course, no. The textual conversations facilitate your understanding of the key ideas between these texts. So that's what you're bringing forth in your essay. So let's take a look at a bit of evidence which reflects this notion of confinement in Mrs. Dalloway. The quote reads, "The perfect hostess he called her, she had cried. She had the makings of the perfect hostess, he said." Okay, so she's referring to what Peter Walsh had called her, the perfect hostess. And we know that that term itself is loaded with this presumptuousness that the female welcomes her role as domesticity. And the notion of being a hostess is also fairly illusory in the sense that she has this job of welcoming people into her home, and it's all very performative. There's a sense of performance attached to being the hostess as she appeals to and she entertains those in her presence. And there is also a sense of futility to be attached to being a hostess, in the sense that it's not an important role that one must undertake. It's a role for those who are part of the upper classes of society, those who can afford to throw dinner parties. And all of these, I guess, limitations of being reduced to the role of a hostess are insecurities which plague Mrs. Dalloway's character, which is why, as we move into the parentheses here, the brackets, she had cried, and I've shortened that quote there, she cries at being called the perfect hostess, because it is this reminder of what she finds to be the futility of her existence, which is something that confines her character. It continues, "She had the makings of a perfect hostess," he said, and the repetition of perfect hostess almost functions to make the reader aware of how that term repeats within her mind and brings to life her, I guess, futility as she searches for some sense of meaning in her existence, which she does not find in her domesticity. So after what I've framed in those bits of analysis, let's take a look at how you could put this into a paragraph. So what I've broken up here is exemplar analysis from an actual body paragraph, so you can take note and you can use that to facilitate you writing your own exemplar essays. The repetition of perfect hostess frames the emotive moment of existential crisis placed within the parentheses. Now, the use of the parentheses do mark, and I've said it in the next sentence here, a symbolic movement into the subconscious of Mrs. Dalloway. And of course, an interest of Virginia Woolf's context was that of psychoanalysis, which is the movement into the psyche of the individual. We have a video on context and Virginia Woolf, and it looks at Freud and psychoanalysis. I guarantee that if you watch that, you'll be more informed on this notion within the text. Existentialism is another key idea of the time. Because of the war and a sense of disillusionment, the individual is left in this sense of existential angst. So there's lots of contextual allusions that you could draw here that I've, I guess, signalled through my analysis. The parentheses marks a symbolic movement into Mrs. Dalloway's subconscious, wherein panic is sparked through the insult of being named the perfect hostess. And that's what it is for her. It's an insult because it renders salient her existence as that which is futile. To be a hostess means to project your focus onto the entertainment of those external to oneself. And that's a point there I'll just flag, which serves as a nice connection to the hours, right? As Clarissa realizes her want to host the party for Richard serves to distract from her own, I guess, crisis in her existence. And that's why she's so obsessed with his character and celebrating him, and his death serves to form as a realization of her own futility. The meaning behind the phrase holds sentiments of mundanity, emptiness, and domesticated futility, all of which serve to confine the character of Mrs. Dalloway as she navigates her way through the novel. Okay, so example from the text, analysis to prove to you how you could bring confinement into your analysis as a potential focal point for a body paragraph. Okay, next bit of text. She had the oddest sense of being herself invisible, unseen, unknown. There being no more marrying, no more having of children now, but only this astonishing and rather solemn progress with the rest of them up Bond Street, this being Mrs. Dalloway. Not even Clarissa anymore, this being Mrs. Richard Dalloway. Okay, her syntax is obviously very long and elongated, potentially an allusion to the formal mode of stream of consciousness as we move through all of the thoughts that seem to plague the mind of Mrs. Dalloway. There's a lot of anaphora in the quote, the repetition of the same phrase at the beginning of certain clauses to show the repetitious nature of some of her thoughts. And there is, like I mentioned, this elongated, drawn-out thought process to show how she's overwhelmed by all of these insecurities, these moments of confinement in her own existence. So that's kind of some key points there. But what I do want to, I guess, dwell on are certain ideas. She has been married. She has had her children. And now that she's fulfilled both the marital domestic role and the maternal role, Mrs. Dalloway is at this point of disillusionment. She really doesn't know how to go forth with her existence. And I think an important point to consider is this text intentionally places us smack bang in the middle of Mrs. Dalloway's life. It's the middle of the year, it's the middle of her existence, and she's having what we know in the contemporary world as a midlife crisis. She's confined in her existence. She's exhausted what her context has, I guess, dubbed onto her to be the pinnacle of her existence, being married and being a mother, and she now doesn't know how to progress forward. And that all comes to, I guess, a climax in this last bit here. She's not even Clarissa anymore. She has no identity for herself, but she lives as Mrs. Richard Dalloway. She lives as being signified by the identity of her husband, and that entraps her. That is the confinement. So to analyse, the elongated syntax foregrounds Mrs. Dalloway's central crisis, the sense of her life as engulfed in a glaring shock of meaninglessness now that she's exhausted her feminine role of wife and mother. The use of tricolon is the listing of 3 in invisible, unseen, unknown, reinforces her sense of futile existence. This is then followed by a contextual allusion to the hierarchical position of women in marriage as subsuming the identity of their spouse, and not only subsuming the identity, but also accepting a subservience and inferiority to the existence of men within the context. Alright guys, I hope that you found that useful. So what you've taken away from this video is a central concern, that being confinement. Confinement in these examples is channeled through the female frustrated existence of Mrs. Dalloway. However, you could extend that analysis and also look at the masculine entrapment of Septimus Warren Smith as well throughout your essay. So if you're thinking about the bigger picture here, okay, how does this help me in crafting my response? Start off with paragraphs on confinement, compare how your understanding of confinement is enhanced through your watching of the hours, and then you could go forth and discuss a different idea in the second half of your essay. If you have any questions about the analysis, please do feel free to comment. If you do like this content, like and subscribe to our channel. And if you love this sort of analysis and you want more of it, check out our resources. They will enhance your English studies, and I guarantee they will also enhance your results. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope very much to see you in the next video. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. If you do like the content, subscribe to our channel and we'll have more videos coming your way.
That's right guys, thanks for watching, and please make sure you check out our online resource database. We've had a team of state rank achievers and heads of English put these together for you, covering everything from essay structures and examples all the way through to craft of writing and comprehension skills. So check them out at ignitehse.com.au, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.